call your first witness.
Your Honor, before calling our first witness, we'd like to read in select portions of Al Everton's deposition.
Okay.
We're going to start at page 28, line 18.
Okay.
Okay, I will ask you about that in a moment, but first, did you have anything to drink before midnight?
No, sir. Pretty much the whole bar knew it was my 21st birthday. My friends kept telling everybody that I was going to do 21 shots.
That was not a part of the plan?
It was not part of my plan. I just wanted to get my first legal beer and some shots.
Continuing on to page 29, line 1. Was it your plan to drive that night?
No.
Then why did you have the keys to your car?
I live on the other side of town. Those guys got together and I was going to get a ride with them or with Liber.
Okay, have you ever had alcohol before your 21st birthday?
A little, a beer here and there. I have never had any hard liquor.
Have you ever been drunk?
Maybe once or twice.
And then we're going to jump to page 30. Line 18, what happened next?
I held up my keys and said I was going to Michigan Mike's.
Why did you do that?
Everybody knows Max hates that place. Those two have been involved in some epic battles over customers.
Now we're going to jump to page 31, line 17. Do you use social media?
Yes,
What do you use?
I am on Facebook and Twister.
How do I find you on Facebook?
My page name is Al Overton.
And Twister?
Overton 440, 4040.
We're now on page 32, starting again, continuing from line 1 to 2. To your knowledge, have your Twister or Facebook ever been hacked?
No,
So if I were looking at anything you posted on those pages, it would have been posted by you?
I assume so.
So,
Anything from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, we read in the portions that we wanted at the beginning.
Okay. Defense, call your next witness.
All right, this time the defense calls Max Petunia.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Max Petunia, and I'm from Steelton.
Max, what do you do for a living?
I am the owner of Petunia Enterprises LLC and Montana Max's Good Times Saloon.
Max, why are you here today?
I'm here because an accident happened on Route 60 right outside one of our parking lots, and one of the drivers brought this lawsuit.
What type of business do you run, Max? Or what type of business is Montana Max's?
It's a restaurant. We have lots of different food items, different things that really set us apart from other places in Steelton.
Who do you compete with for business?
We compete with other places in Steelton, like Michigan Mike's, but they're a microbrewery and sell things like malt liquor. We don't sell that type of stuff here.
Okay. What separates Montana Max's from other restaurants in town?
We have things for the entire family. We have everything. We have a little bit of everything for each person. I mean, anybody in the crowd can find something that they want. We have games, big TVs, and we have specials and specialty nights as well.
As the owner of a restaurant, what types of risks do you run into whenever you run a business like this?
We often have large crowds, for sporting events and our specialty nights. And, anytime that a restaurant also serves alcohol, you have those combinations, and you have some risk of excess drinking and maybe some arguments, but nothing big,
So as the owner, how do you address those risks in particular?
Well, we employ a very rigorous training program that all of our serving staff goes through. Our servers are trained with our policies and procedures from day one. new hires are required to go through a shadowing process, and this process is done before they're even allowed to serve any food or drinks.
Well, specifically, who goes through that rigorous training program?
Everyone, all new hires, all of our servers and staff, including servers, bartenders, our shot servers, everybody.
What do your shot servers do differently than other servers?
Well, they only serve our house shots. But those things are pretty watered down.
Objection, Your Honor. Per the stipulation in this case, we have stipulated to the amount of alcohol in each shot, and based on this witness's characterization, that stipulation is being violated.
Your Honor, Max is simply testifying to a drink that he serves in his restaurant. I don't believe it violates any of the stipulations for this competition.
What's the issue?
Violation of the stipulation? What would I object to?
You're the one making the objection.
Mischaracterization, yeah, mischaracterization of the evidence.
Okay, what
Yeah,
about
there-
that?
Your Honor, I'm not asking, what qualifies as a drink at Max's. I've simply asked what types of drink the shot servers carry around in the restaurant. Max is simply testifying to what they carry on their trays.
I'm gonna overrule that. I think you can cross-examine on that issue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Max, where would a member of your staff go to if they had questions concerning, or if they had questions on serving alcohol to customers?
Well, they would go to our policies and procedures. They would, because those lay out the proper way to handle situations involving serving customers alcohol.
And Max, according to your policies and procedures, what types of behavior could indicate intoxication?
Well, coming in quiet and then suddenly after several drinks becoming loud and boisterous, things like things like that.
Thank you. What rules do you have in place to address, or what rules do you have in place to prevent intoxication?
Well, that would be in our policies and procedures, and I believe that would be section 7.5. 7.5, yeah. And in that section, it lays out how, like, the ways staff works to prevent intoxication, which includes things like serving water, offering non-alcoholic beverages. We make sure that our kitchen is a full-service kitchen up until 30 minutes prior to closing. And we also make sure that our staff knows how to recognize things such as birthdays and celebrations.
Well, how does your staff know how many drinks a customer has had?
Well, my staff is amazing. My staff is very good, and they're capable of counting the number of drinks that a customer has. However, we do recommend in section 7.3.1 using bar tab receipts. However, it's only a suggestion. It's not a requirement.
And what are the rules, according to your policies and procedures, on removing intoxicated guests?
Well, we do everything that we possibly can to make sure that they do not leave the premises if they are intoxicated. We offer them water, we offer them free food, offer calling them a ride, and we give them the food and the water until their ride gets there.
Besides intoxication, what other types of behaviors do your rules address?
Well, I believe if you look at section 7.6 of our policies and procedures, you will see that that if a customer becomes agitated, at that point we do everything in our power to make sure that they are escorted out of the bar as quickly as possible, especially on busy nights such as January 7th.
Well, we'll get to the incident on January 7th in just a moment, but moving away from your policies and procedures, what additional rules do you have in place at Max's?
Well, unless someone orders a shot with a beer, we only serve one beverage at a time, or one alcoholic beverage at a time.
Max, on top of your policies and procedures, what other types of training how else do you train your staff?
Well, we bring in, besides everything that I just told you, the policies and procedures, we also bring in a outside consultant to go through the TIPS procedure, which stands for Training for Intervention Procedures. Now, this is basically where our staff learns how to spot physically intoxicated persons, and it's just a practice where our servers can practice these the rules that we have in place.
And how often do these training sessions take place?
We do this twice a year, every 6 months.
Max, you mentioned earlier why you were here today. Were you at the restaurant the night of January 7th, 2013?
Yes, I was. I was working behind the bar. It was Mexican Monday. It was also the BCS National Championship game. It was a little bit crowded at Max's, and so I like to be there personally on the busier nights, just so I can keep an eye on the crowd as well and keep an eye on our guests.
And specifically, what do you remember about the crowd that evening?
Well, it was actually one of the largest crowds that we've ever had, but it was never out of our control.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by not out of your control?
Well, I personally was there to keep an eye on the crowd, and my staff is the best staff. We had everything perfectly under control. No matter how big the crowd, especially when we work together as well as we do. Plus, it kind of died down later in the evening.
Well, what staff did you have working that night?
Well, we had a full staff. We had, we had our bartenders, full servers, waiters and waitresses. We had our kitchen staff. We also had our shot servers there as well.
Now, are your shot servers trained in spotting visibly intoxicated persons?
Unfortunately, they're not always trained in tips. However, they do go through, they are aware of our policies and procedures. So,
Objection, speculation to what the shot girls are aware of.
Response?
Your Honor, the question was, are your shot servers trained in spotting visibly intoxicated patrons? Max is simply saying what they are trained in and how, if they are trained in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anything else?
They can be trained in it, but she's saying what they know.
I think what they're aware of is what they're trained in. I think that's sort of what it was going for. I'll overrule that.
Max, again, are your shot servers trained in spotting visibly intoxicated patrons?
not in tips. However, they know our policies and procedures. We train all of our staff in our policies and procedures, and just unfortunately, they are not always there for the actual tips training itself.
Max, do you remember seeing Al Overton that night?
Yes, sir, I do. Him and his buddies came in around, I think it was around 10:30 p.m. that night, and they were there to celebrate Al's birthday.
How do you know they were celebrating Al's birthday?
I mean, they were telling everyone within earshot that it was Al's 21st birthday, and that's also when I informed my staff to keep an eye on them.
By your observations, when did Al Overton start drinking that evening?
It wasn't before midnight. In fact, it was just after midnight that he had his first drink.
And again, by your observations, how much to drink did Al Overton have that night?
He only had 4 shots and 1 beer.
How do you know that's all he had?
That's all he had before he and his friends got into an argument and he left.
Well, what was the argument over?
From what I observed, he and his buddies were inappropriately touching one of my shot girls, and they were blaming it on Al, and Al got very agitated at that point.
What happened when Mr. Overton attempted to leave?
Well, as he was leaving, all agitated, he knocked over trays of drinks and got into an argument with my bouncer, and so he was escorted out. He vomited. He vomited because his stomach was not feeling well.
Max, why did you not offer Mr. Overton a cab ride home?
Because our policy, he was just agitated. He wasn't intoxicated. Therefore, our policies and procedures did not kick in at that point.
And if Mr. Overton had shown clear signs of intoxication, what would you have done differently?
Well, at that point, our policies and procedures would have kicked in, and we would have offered him, food, free food and water until his ride arrived. We would have even suggested calling him a cab. However, he was not intoxicated. He was just agitated. That is what his behavior suggested.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Any cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, I'll show you.
Yeah, I'll text you.
January 7th is a Monday, correct?
Yes, sir. I believe I just said that.
And at your bar, it's what you call a Mexican Monday.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
Mexican Mondays is very popular, correct?
Absolutely. We offer free salsa and chips. We have 15 dishes that are half off. We have drink specials as well. I mean, it's just a fun thing for the entire family.
Those drink specials. You sell dirt cheap drinks on Mexican Mondays. Is that right?
Oh, we do have a drink special where we sell 50-cent Coronas. However, it's more about the half off food and the free salsa and chips than anything else.
So to answer my question, you serve 50-cent beers on Mexican Mondays.
We serve 1 50-cent beer, correct? But we also serve free chips and salsa and half price food.
On busy nights, you bring in extra staff to work the bar.
Yeah, we have our Miss Mischievous girls. It just goes with the theme. Montana Max, Mexican Monday, Miss Mischievous. We bring in some girls to come help out.
And these employees of yours wander around the bar selling shots to your customers.
Yeah, they do. They sell shots. They have their own set of rules and they're trained in our policies and procedures.
And those rules state that they're only allowed to sell 1 shot per customer.
Absolutely. Yeah. We just want to. They just have that extra rule there in place.
But these shot girls work for tips.
They get paid salary actually.
So these girls never receive tips.
I'm sure they could, but it's not recommended.
January 7th was a busy night, correct?
Yeah, it was a busy night that night. And we had the BCS National Championship football game, and it was also Mexican Monday. That's one of our popular promotions.
Your bar was also overcrowded.
Yeah, towards the beginning of the night, it was overcrowded. It started to die down a little bit after the game after the game was over.
You stated earlier that you saw Allerton consume 4 to 5 drinks and a beer.
No, I did not. I stated earlier that I saw Al take 4 drinks and drink 1 beer. So no, it was not 4 to 5.
But this was a very busy night in your bar.
Yeah, it was busy during the beginning and it was light during the end.
So it's fair to say that you weren't watching one customer the entire night.
Me and my staff were keeping an eye on Al Everton and his buddies. We knew that it was his 21st birthday, and I informed my staff to keep an eye on this group, and I personally kept an eye on Al Everton and his group. Yes, sir.
That staff isn't trained properly, though.
My staff is absolutely trained properly.
The Miss Mischievous girls are not trained in tips.
They are not trained in tips. However, they go through a very vigorous training process when it comes to my policies and procedures. We go above and beyond tips with our policies and procedures.
And these Miss Mischievous girls, you hire a variety of them all the time, correct?
I wouldn't say a variety, but we hire women. I feel like that feel like that's a little rude, but,
These mischievous girls, they don't work for long periods of time at your bar.
well, we often have new ones there, but again, each time we go through the policies and procedures with our shop girls. With
Your
our
policies and
mischievous
procedures
girls.
state that you're the first line of defense when serving alcohol to customers.
Absolutely, we are. We are the first line of defense.
And it states to count the number of drinks.
Yeah.
And it states to look for certain behaviors to see if someone's intoxicated,
Yes, absolutely. I believe that's
Like-
section 7.4.
like loud and boisterous speech.
Absolutely. But people like Al who come in loud and boisterous in the very beginning, you know, like they're always loud and boisterous.
Impaired motor coordination,
Oh, absolutely.
and rude behavior.
Some people are just rude, but yeah, absolutely.
Al Overton on January 8th got in a fight with his friends.
He got into an argument with his friends over one of his friends accusing him of inappropriately touching one of my mischievous girls.
He vomited in your bar.
Yeah, he did. He had eaten something bad earlier in the day, and you know his stomach was upset at that point.
He knocked over a tray of drinks in your bar.
Oh my God, he was so agitated after his friends falsely accused him that he just slammed down a tray of drinks on his way out, and that's actually one of the reasons that we asked him to leave, because his agitated behavior was inappropriate for our bar, our restaurant.
He got in a fight with the bouncers of your bar.
He got into a disagreement. The bouncer confronted him about him slamming over the trays of drinks.
So you observed Al Overton drinking in your bar.
Yes, I did.
You observed all these behaviors.
I observed him become agitated when he was falsely accused of something, yes.
And your policy states to not let a person who is intoxicated drive. Leave.
Yes, but Al Overton was not intoxicated. He did not exhibit the behavior of an intoxicated person, nor did he have the sufficient amount of drinks to become intoxicated. In fact, he was just agitated because of him being falsely accused.
You knew it was his 21st birthday.
Again, I believe I've said that. Yes, we did know it was his 21st birthday, and my staff and I kept a close eye on him.
On someone's 21st birthday, when you know they've been drinking, when they show these signs, you don't offer them any water.
I personally did not offer him water that night. No, I did not. But he
You
could
didn't
have
offer
gotten
any
water
food?
at the bar if he wanted to.
You didn't offer him any food.
No, sir, I did not offer him food. However, we did have free salsa and chips out that he was more than welcome to get. If he, there was I mean, it was on every table.
You didn't offer to call a cab.
No, I did not personally offer to call him a cab because he was agitated, and it was a busy night, and he was causing a disruption in my restaurant and disturbing my customers.
So this person that's been drinking in your bar, causing a disruption, you throw him out.
We politely asked him to leave after causing the scene. Yes.
And as he was leaving, he held up his keys, correct?
Yeah. I mean,
No
I
further
assume he
questions.
held up his keys to get in his apartment.
You redirect.
Just briefly, Your Honor. Max, where in your policies does it address drinking alcohol while not in your restaurant?
I mean, nowhere. I mean, that's silly to ask. I mean,
Why not?
because we don't babysit we don't babysit people. We have absolutely no control over them drinking in their house, nor would that be our role to, if somebody goes and drinks in their house and does something, that's not our concern. We are only concerned with people who drink in our establishment. So if somebody goes to their car and drinks, it's not our problem.
What employees at Montana Max's are familiar with the policies and procedures?
Absolutely every single one.
What flavors of malt liquor do you sell at Max's?
None. We don't sell that stuff.
Max, I just have one more question. Why did you allow Al Overton to leave your restaurant that night?
because he wasn't intoxicated, everything suggested that he was agitated, and he was agitated.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, witness may step down. Does the defense have any other witnesses it wishes to call?
Yes, Your Honor, this time we'd like to call Dr. G. Malcolm to stand.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Dr. Gene Malcolm.
Dr. Malcolm, what do you do?
For the past 2 years, I've implemented alcohol safety training programs for Buffalo Wacky Wings across the country, as well as a few in Canada. I've also helped in developing employee handbooks and the procedures for properly monitoring alcohol consumption.
Dr. Malcolm, what degrees do you hold?
I have a bachelor's in pharmacy and toxicology, or pharmacy and hospitality, a master's degree in toxicology, and I have a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry
Where did you receive your education?
from Stilton State.
And why are you here today?
I was asked to give my opinion on Montana Max's tips procedures and whether those procedures were followed by the employees at Montana Max's.
Without giving your opinion, have you come to an opinion as to whether about Montana Max's tips procedures and whether they were followed?
I have.
What did you review in forming that opinion?
I reviewed the depositions of Al Overton, Max Petunia, and Quinn Chase, as well as the police report that was created, the policies and procedures of Montana Max's, and the social media documents that I was provided with.
Are these materials reasonably relied on by other experts in your field?
They are?
Are your opinions offered with a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes, they are.
How did your education in toxicology, pharmacy, and chemistry assist you in forming your opinion?
Well, I was able to, with that education, I'm able to determine an individual's BAC or blood alcohol content based on the number of drinks they had and whether the number of drinks someone has had would affect their behavior.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to tender Dr. G. Malcolm as a expert in hospitality standards and the responsible service of alcohol.
Any objection?
Just to the word responsible service of alcohol, just limited to the service of alcohol.
That's fine, Your Honor.
Okay. Then without objection, she will be entered with that language. You may proceed.
Dr. Malcolm, based on your experience, what is your opinion, your professional experience, what is your opinion about Montana Max's tip system?
Their TIS system is a satisfactory system that would satisfy any hospitality standards in the country.
What specifically about Max's policies led you to that opinion?
Well, first they let all their employees know that they're the first line of defense and that it's their responsibility to make sure that customers don't become dangerous to themselves or to the community. And additionally, it teaches them how the body processes alcohol and how it affects the body.
Your Honor, permission to retrieve a demonstrative of Exhibit D, which has already been entered into evidence as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1, and stage the courtroom.
Yes, go ahead.
And also permission to have the witness come down in front of the jury to further demonstrate.
Yes.
Don't erase that one.
Yeah, no, I know.
You can erase the other one.
I forgot that it had one on there.
Or there's a blank one over here.
There is? Okay.
Well, I mean,
Just pretend you're outlining stuff too.
okay. Well, I haven't done a lot of pointing.
Yeah, that's you. How do Max's policies explain the alcohol absorption process?
Well, in the first section, in 7.1, the section describes how the body absorbs alcohol. It also talks about how the liver removes alcohol from the system, which is approximately 1 drink per hour.
Is the alcohol absorption process important for a server to know?
Oh, absolutely. By knowing how the body absorbs alcohol, they're able to determine how a person or what a person's BAC would be.
How do Max's policies guide servers to estimate when an individual has had too much to drink?
Well, here in section 7.2, it gives a brief description on what BAC is and how it affects the body, and it also provides employees with a diagram that helps them figure out what a guest's BAC would be.
What, if any, correlation exists between blood alcohol content and exhibiting signs of visible intoxication?
Well, the higher the blood alcohol content, the more likely it is that they'll be showing visible signs of intoxication, and also the higher the content, the more pronounced and obvious those signs will be.
Dr. Malcolm, using this chart, can you estimate what Al's BAC was on January 8, 2013 while inside Max's?
Yes, I can. As you can see here, on the night of the accident, Max Petunia, or Al Overton weighed between 225 pounds, which would put him between these two columns here.
How many drinks did Al Overton have at Max's that night?
He had 5 to 6 shots and a beers, which would be 6 to 7 drinks.
And using this chart, what was his BAC at 7 drinks?
So if he had 7 drinks throughout the night and he was there for 2 hours, the body, by the time he left, would have removed 2 drinks. So he would have had 5 drinks in his system, which would put him in this row, and it would put his blood alcohol in between these 2 columns where his weight was. So he'd be at 0.06 to 0.07.
What was his BAC at 6 drinks?
Well, again, we would take away the 2, which would mean he had 4 drinks in his system at the time he left, which would mean that he had 4 drinks in his system, which would put him at 0.05.
Pretend he's circling on the chart. At what BAC level do people usually start to exhibit visible signs of intoxication?
Anybody with experience with alcohol wouldn't display those physical signs of intoxication until 0.15.
Dr. Malcolm, using this chart, how much would Al have had to drink at Max's to achieve a BAC level 0.15?
Well, we see even at the very bottom, if he had 10 drinks in his system, it would have been 0.5 if he was 220, but he weighed more than that, and 2 drinks had already been removed for his system, so it'd be off the charts for him to have a BAC of 0.15.
Dr. Malcolm, what do Max's policies explain about detecting visible signs of a possibly intoxicated person? 7.4.
Here in 7.4 of the policies, it talks about observing guest behavior, and the policies here tell you that you need to look at signs like stumbling, tripping, spilling drinks, or slurring speech.
How is this section used to train Max's staff on the responsible service of alcohol?
This section is used to just let them know what they need to be looking for in order to make sure that they safely serve to the guests in the restaurant.
Did Al exhibit behavior that night that would indicate that he was intoxicated?
Well, he wasn't slurring his speech and he wasn't tripping, and while he did exhibit signs that here would indicate intoxication, they were all explained by non-alcohol related reasons.
What led you to the conclusion that those were not signs of intoxication?
Well, Al did vomit while he was in the restaurant, but that was explained because he did have bad food that evening. He did get into an argument with his friends, but that was also explained by them falsely accusing him of groping one of the waitresses in the bar. And that's when the bouncers had approached him and he started to get upset, and when he left is when the trays were flipped over, kind of in that whole commotion.
And how do Max's policies train staff to monitor these signs?
Well, if we go back to section 7.3, the policies say that you need to count the drinks that the guests are drinking, and you also need to monitor the behavior.
What are Max's rules about the number of drinks served?
Max's you can't serve more than 1 drink at a time unless it's just 1 shot and 1 beer.
Did Max's staff follow this policy regarding Al Overton?
Yes, there's no indication that he was served more than 1 shot and 1 beer, even though he did go around to all of the shop girls to get a drink.
What other policies that Max's have that they use regarding Al Overton?
Well, Al Overton came in celebrating his 21st birthday, and right here in section 7.5, it says to pay special attention to guests when they're celebrating their 21st birthday. So when Al did come in, Max Petunia immediately recognized it was his 21st birthday, informed his staff, and told them to keep a special eye on them. And while they were there, they were joking about how they were going to be taking 21 shots, but they don't need to kick him out at this time, they just need to monitor him more closely.
What are Max's procedures regarding handling a visibly intoxicated person?
Well, first, if we go to the last section, so section 7.6, the policies say if there's a visibly intoxicated person trying to leave, you need to prevent them from leaving and either call them a cab or see if someone else can take them home. Additionally, if we were to go back to earlier sections, I believe, I can't find the section now, but the policies also say that they are not to serve a visibly intoxicated guest any more drinks once they determine that he is visibly intoxicated.
When was Al served his last drinks at Max's?
There's no indication in the record that after he was spilled the drinks or got into the argument with his friends that he was served any more drinks.
What did Al indicate to Max's staff about how he would be getting home that night?
He said that he had a ride.
Was there any notice to Max's staff that he would be driving?
No, there's no indication that they would have known that he drove there, so when he waved his keys over the head, it could have just been to let them know that he needed those to get into his apartment.
What reason did Al give for holding up his keys?
He was just trying to upset Montana Max. He was letting him know he was going to a rival bar and leaving at that time, and that he had a ride.
What occurred during Al's exit from Max's that night?
Well, these policies are in place to help ensure the safety of everybody. So when a guest starts to get into an argument with his friends, they need to make sure that this doesn't become violent and make sure no one gets hurt. So that's why the bouncers there immediately got involved and escorted him out of the bar.
What are Max's policies about letting a patron leave with a ride home?
Well, if a patron has a ride home, they're more than welcome to leave.
Thank you, Dr. Malkin. I'm going to have you sit now, and I'll keep this from the
Yeah, leave it up.
Yeah, okay. Were Max's staff required to follow Al out of the bar?
No, I was not showing signs of intoxication. And even if someone were to suspect he was intoxicated, he indicated that he had a ride. So because he was free to leave, there's no reason to follow him after he leaves.
Where did Al go after leaving Max's?
He walked across the street and went to a parking lot and sat in his car for about 30 minutes.
What did he do there?
He was drinking Bad Dog liquor.
What indicated?
Objection, speculation.
Your Honor, I'm about to go through all these questions to show
I'm
you.
an expert.
He's an expert, one, and he's already reviewed the materials in this case, and I'm about to go through questions that show the plethora of evidence that he drank in his car.
Your Honor, at this time, we have not heard any of that evidence, and the witness should not be allowed to, while experts are allowed to speculate, they're allowed to speculate based on facts. We have not heard those at this time, and so this is rampant speculation.
Sustained,
Move to strike, Your Honor.
stricken, lay the foundation.
Think about how I do it. What did you know about what was found out of his car? All that stuff. Just go through that, and then you have the foundation.
How about what indicated to you of what Al was doing in his car?
After the crash, a half-empty bottle of Bad Dog was found in his car. This particular liquor was purple in color, and when Al emerged from the scene of the crash, he had purple stains all over his shirt. Also, in his social media, he indicated that it was his plan to drink the Bad Dog. at the end of the
Objection,
night.
hearsay.
Your Honor,
Sorry.
She was laying the foundation.
Yeah.
I was
You're-
trying to say because we just objected on it.
Your Honor, at this time, I am approaching the opposing counsel with Exhibit C that you can mark as, I guess, Defendant's Exhibit 1. This,
Okay.
and I'm also going to reverse the witness.
Go ahead.
Is this Al Overton's Twister page that you reviewed in forming your opinion on this case?
It is.
Is it an accurate and fair representation of what you reviewed?
It is.
Does it look to be altered in any way?
No, it does not.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to admit Exhibit C into evidence as Defendant's Exhibit 1.
The objection.
Hearsay. Your Honor, this is covered by Rule 803, subsection 3, and that covers exceptions to hearsay of statements of the declarant's, existing state of mind and mental impression. This is time-stamped, it's his Twister page, and it shows a planar intent that is covered by 803, subsection 3. Also, we have laid the foundation in reading Al's deposition that his Twister account has not been hacked, and that any post should be made by him, and as stipulated, all exhibits are authenticated.
Your Honor, while this is timestamped for 10:30 p.m., 2.5 hours prior to him even beginning to drink, this wouldn't establish a clear intent or plan for the time that we are talking about right now, 12 to 2. So therefore, this would be inadmissible under that exception.
Your Honor, we can rephrase the question that I'm going to proceed with, and that what was his plan before he got into his car. I did not ask what his plan was while he was in his car, which we know was after 10:30 p.m.
Your Honor, further, I would say that this offers no indication that Al Overton planned to drink in his car after the night was over. There's no time frame of when he's saying he was going to drink this, where he was going to drink this, how he was going to drink this. It's too ambiguous for a jury to reasonably make any inference off of it, would further be hearsay.
Yeah, I'm gonna overrule that objection. You can cross-examine on those points. It will be entered as defense exhibit 1, 2,
One.
1.
Can you read this post for me, please?
Yes, Al Overton twisted at 10:30 that going out for my 21st, going to finish the night off with some bad dog.
Does Max's sell Bad Dog Liquor?
No, they don't.
What do tips require of Max's staff to monitor Al sitting in his car?
Al is free to leave, as I said before, because he wasn't intoxicated, and even if someone did suspect so, he indicated he had a ride, so there's no need to monitor him while he sits in his car.
Did you come to an opinion as to whether Maxis was to blame for this accident?
I have.
What did you review to come to that conclusion?
I reviewed the police report that was prepared. I reviewed Al Overton's deposition, as well as Quinn Chase's deposition.
What stood out to you in Quinn's deposition?
What stood out to me the most is that during the course of the day, during a good portion of the day, he was at a party where he was drinking throughout.
What stood out to you about the police report?
In this, it shows that
Objection,
Quinn...
improper opinion.
Your Honor, I was just asking what he reviewed in the materials in this case. He's just relaying what the police report relayed.
How is it improper?
Your Honor, I would also add hearsay, because we were talking about an out-of-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter, the police report in this case. And it's an improper opinion because he's been established as an expert in hospitality and an expert in service of alcohol, but has no way been qualified to review police reports or how accidents are, what is the cause of accident, or what's important or stands out on a police report.
What about that?
Your Honor, I was just asking about what the police report said, and that's covered by 703, that an expert can talk about the facts in the materials that he reviewed in for his opinion, but yet those materials and facts themselves do not have to be admissible for him to talk about them. I was not asking him to give an opinion about what the significance of Quinn's seatbelt not wearing was, but just that he was not wearing a seatbelt.
Your Honor, Mayor Townsend. 703 does allow for inadmissible evidence to be entered if they relied upon it in coming to their conclusions. Today, his conclusions were about the service of alcohol and the hospitality. In no way does the police report help administer that conclusion. Furthermore, 703 can't be used as a backdoor to hearsay, and the whole exhibit be entered into evidence. Specific language of that report can be entered and is permissible, but can't be a backdoor for the entire exhibit.
Your Honor, we're not trying to enter the police report into evidence.
Your Honor, if I may, she's just simply asking him to be a conduit to hearsay and saying what stood out, what did you read off of this? There's no opinion being offered here.
What's the operative 703 language that's important here?
The probative effect substantially, the prejudice.
That's 403.
But the reverse of 403, the probative effect does not substantially outweigh the prejudicial value in this case.
That's not what I'm going for.
Isn't that that he can testify to the facts that he reviewed, and that it's not meant to be admissible?
If what?
If he relied on them to form his opinion?
And
That they are reliable facts?
no. We don't have one rule book in this room.
I have, sorry,
Yeah, I got it right here.
I thought it was quizzing.
Would you
An
recommend?
expert may base an opinion on facts or data in the case that the expert has made aware of or personally observed. If experts in the particular field would reasonably rely on these kinds of facts or data in forming an opinion on the subject.
Would a hospitality expert rely upon a police report in giving testimony about the service of alcohol?
I mean, Your Honor, he's testifying about a car accident that involved, alcohol. I would say that yes. And he's here to establish whether or not Max was to blame for this accident.
Yeah, but how does the cause of accident determined by a beat cop traffic officer have anything to do with whether or not Max has served alcohol to Al Overton?
That's a good
question? Do you think I should strike it from my direct sidebar? Okay.
Yes. Also, as a sidebar,
Stand.
generally whether you or not you bring your seatbelt is statutorily inadmissible in most states, and I think most judges are gonna know that and not conform.
Do you think that I should
Yeah.
cut this whole entire line of questioning?
Everything about the police report should be cut.
What about Quinn's deposition? He was drinking before driving.
That's fine.
That's okay, I didn't object to that because he is
Oh, yeah.
alcohol
Take
person.
out any mention of seatbelt, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think that I should also take out, what do these materials say about how the accident occurred?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. How the accident occurred and what the police did are,
I was just kind of
Are
using you
unlikely
as
to
a fact
be.
witness for a second. That's why. Okay.
yeah.
Is Max's staff to blame for this accident?
Nope.
Thank you. Please answer any of the questions that also, what is the procedure for publishing this to the jury? I take this from him and say what?
May I publish to the jury?
May I have this exhibit?
Y'all aren't gonna, the policy's already in evidence, right?
Right.
Yeah.
May I have permission to publish this to the jury?
Mhm.
And I just take it back with me and it just
Give it to
constructively?
the jury.
Okay, that's how it works. Okay. I didn't know if you gave it to them or foreman or.
If you're gonna publish it to the jury, give it to the jury.
May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Malkin, you said an interesting phrase earlier. You said that this chart right here is helpful for employees to come up with a guessed BAC, correct?
Correct.
In fact, this is only a guide in determining somebody's BAC.
Did you say guess or guessed?
Guessed. You used the word guessed BAC for employees to do a guessed BAC. Those were your own words.
Yes, the BSC of the guests.
A estimated, as in guessing.
Oh, I said guessed.
Okay. Well, you said that this is an estimate. This is a tool to estimate.
Correct.
Okay. It's only a guide.
Correct.
Now, the official BAC that was taken of Al Overton was actually a .12.
I don't know if you could call it official because the instrument that was used was not working properly.
Well, the error rate of the instrument was only .03 plus or minus.
Which is quite significant.
So Al Overton's estimated, or Al Overton's BAC based off of breathalyzer was anywhere from .09 to .15.
That's correct.
Now, you also talked a little bit about food. Food can be a factor in calculating BAC.
That's right.
However, you didn't know what kind of food Al had in order to discuss that factor in the BAC calculations.
No, but it's not going to affect it substantially.
So you had no clue about the food for your BAC calculations.
That's correct.
However, you were later able to conclude definitively that food was the cause of Al's vomiting.
That's right.
You'd agree with me that bartenders and servers aren't required to breathalyze their patrons.
I would agree with that.
It's not reasonable for them to do that.
Correct.
So they have to rely on the visible physical attributes of the patrons in order to estimate a BAC level.
Yes.
That's why we have trainings,
Correct.
like tips,
Yes.
stops.
Correct.
However, you'd agree with me that several of the employees at Montana Max were not trained in tips.
I don't know if it was several, but a handful perhaps.
Some employees were not trained in tips.
Correct.
Some employees were not trained in stops.
That's right.
Some employees were trained on the policies of Montana Max's, though.
Yes, all of them were.
And you've seen these policies.
I have.
These policies are used to monitor alcohol and excessive consumption.
That's right.
One of the ways for servers to do that is through bar tabs.
That's one way.
They replace the bar tab in a shot glass at the end of the table every time a drink is ordered.
That's correct.
And this keeps an accurate count of the drinks the patron has.
It could.
Well, it would list all the drinks they ordered, correct?
Correct.
So this would be an accurate count, correct?
Right.
And in this case, we don't have a bar tab.
No, we don't.
So we don't have an accurate count of the amount of drinks Al had.
You're right.
This policy also discusses changes in behavior.
Correct.
And it discusses discusses changes of behavior as being one of the best indicators of intoxication.
That's right.
It lists changes of behavior as being loud and boisterous.
Correct.
There's also behavioral impairment to motor coordinators as a sign for intoxication.
That's right.
Rude behavior is a sign for intoxication.
It is.
And these are all signs that employees of Montana Max are aware of.
That's right.
Now, on the night of January 7th going into the 8th, Al Overton got into a loud argument with his own friends.
He did.
Al Overton stumbled.
I didn't come across any information that said he stumbled.
Well, actually, you did come across information that he stumbled, didn't you?
I don't believe so.
Because you reviewed all the depositions.
I did.
And in the depositions, it said that Al Overton stumbled.
When he tipped over a tray of drinks.
In the depositions, it said that Al Overton stumbled.
Okay.
It says he knocked over tray drinks, there's no like stumble in Max's, it just says he knocked over tray drinks, but I think that's totally implied and reasonable inference that he stumbled while he knocked over tray drinks.
He admits that he
There
admits
is
it.
stumbled in there, but.
Don't admit that.
Okay.
So Al Overton stumbled.
I mean, you're saying that it says it in there, but I don't remember coming across that.
He knocked over a tray of drinks.
That's right.
He vomited everywhere.
He vomited while he was there, but I wouldn't say he vomited everywhere.
Well, he vomited.
Yes,
And he got into a rude exchange with the bouncer.
that's right.
Now, you would agree with me that based off this policy, Montana Max employees are not to serve anyone who displays signs of intoxication.
Yes.
Signs of intoxication are characterized as those changes in behaviors that we just discussed.
They can be.
Further, it discusses when intoxicated patrons attempt to leave the bar. This policy discusses how to handle intoxicated patrons leaving the bar, correct?
Correct.
And it says that you should offer them something to drink.
That's right.
You should offer them some food.
Correct.
You should offer them a ride home.
Yes.
This is reasonable things that you and I would offer a person who was intoxicated.
That's right.
Yet none of these things were offered to Al.
Because he wasn't intoxicated.
Al was celebrating a 21st birthday, correct?
Yes.
And Al was a person leaving the bar who had just celebrated a 21st birthday.
That's right.
And he was not offered a single one of these things.
Because he wasn't intoxicated.
You also discussed a little bit about this Twister page from Al Overton. Now on this Twister page, it doesn't say where he was going to consume Bad Dog.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't say how he was going to consume it.
No.
Doesn't say who he was going to consume it with.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't provide any context about where, what, when, how, or who the Bad Dog was going to get consumed that night.
That's incorrect.
That's incorrect. That doesn't say those things.
It says at the end of the night.
So it doesn't say how, who, or where that was going to be consumed.
Correct.
Nothing further.
Any redirect?
Just briefly. Dr. Malkin, what was the breathalyzer reading of Al after the accident?
It was 0.12.
Why is it significant, in your opinion, about whether Al drank in his car?
Because he clearly didn't have enough to drink while he was at the bar to have a BAC that high, so it would have had to have been drank after he left the bar.
In forming your opinion about Al, did you take the food in his stomach into account?
No,
How does that affect your estimation of Al's BAC?
it doesn't.
Are servers required to take someone's blood alcohol content while at the bar?
No, they're not.
Why is your estimation of Al's BAC still significant?
Because the factors that are relevant here still, I don't know what they're doing.
Because you were hired to look retrospectively and to estimate whether or not he was actually intoxicated.
Because I was hired retrospectively to determine whether he was intoxicated.
That's all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Witness may step down. Does the defense have any other witnesses it wishes to call?
We do not, Your Honor.
We have no further witnesses.
Okay.
Also,
Any
motion
motions that we need to take up?
I don't know if we need a better way of saying that.
Your Honor, you were saying?
Any motions that we need to take up at this time?
At this time, we would like to renew our earlier Rule 50 motion for judgment as a matter of law and the issue of evidence.
Okay. Anything on that?
Your Honor, we've heard further testimony from the bar owner himself as well as an expert, but several of the policies that would have been reasonable for any person to implement with a intoxicated or a person celebrating their 21st birthday would have implemented if they had seen the conduct displayed by Al Overton. This is reasonable for a jury to determine whether the Montana Max failed to act in observing these behaviors or failed to act upon those behaviors.
All right. I'm going to deny that motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. Defense rest.
Ready for, let's take like 5 minutes before.
Apologize in advance, I am using this. I'm actually,
Do you need this?
Somebody
No,
look at it, so-
Is this?
no, I got it. How does, can I just ask you a question?
How does
For-
what?
The jury verdict form, do I need to tender that before I use like a blown up version of it? No, I can just use a blown up version.
Yeah. We just have that with us, like,
You just use it. We'll have it tomorrow. By the way, the BAC chart is like crazy pixelated.
Fantastic.
Just FYI.
May it please the court?
Yep. They're
Members
posting
of the
TV.
jury, a man walks into a bar. Now typically, that's a start to a funny joke. But as you've seen in today's case, this is no joke. Because when a man walked into a bar to celebrate his 21st birthday, he took shot after shot after shot, and then was allowed to leave with his keys in his hand to get behind the wheel of his vehicle and drive away. But he didn't get very far. In fact, he barely got out of the parking lot when he T-boned into another car, injuring a local resident. Members of the jury, that's no laughing matter. On the night of January 7th, going into January 8th, was a big night. The College National Football Championship was on, and Al Overton was turning 21. To top it all off, it was Mexican Monday. The drinks were cheap, 50-cent Coronas, and the shot girls were only an arm's distance away. So this was the perfect place to celebrate Al's 21st birthday. And Al and his friends boasted over and over again that they were going to take 21 shots. A shot from each shot girl, a shot every 15 minutes. However, during the course of the night, there was a change in behavior. Al started becoming loud and boisterous to his own friends. Al stumbled, knocked over a tray of drinks, vomited, and reluctantly was escorted out with his keys in his hands, saying, "I'm going to another bar." And members of the jury, he did exactly that. He did exactly what he warned the other patrons of the bar and the employees. He took the keys to his car, got behind the wheel, and drove to another bar. But as you heard, he didn't get far because he crashed into Quinn Chase. Now you've heard from Quinn Chase today. She's a local resident and alumnus of Steel and State. But most important, she's a victim and she's alive. And she's doing well now as a graduate student. Luckily, this accident didn't permanently injure Quinn Chase, but it could have. And it could have happened to anyone in this community, any one of our family members or friends, when an intoxicated person leaves a bar with keys in their hands to drive away. This incident could have happened to anyone. Now, we've also heard a lot about what happened to Quinn that night. Yeah, Quinn was hours. And Quinn was drinking throughout that 7-hour period, but Quinn's plan at the beginning of the night was to go somewhere else, was to drive. And because of that, Quinn limited her alcohol intake. Now this is different to Al's plan of the night, when Al's plan was to drink, and drink, and drink, because Al was celebrating his 21st birthday. Now members of the jury, we're not in a criminal court. We're not in a criminal court. I'm not here arguing a case of driving under the influence. Today, we're here in a civil court to hold a bar responsible for their service of alcohol to patrons. And in a civil court, the burden of proof is by a preponderance of the evidence, which just means more likely than not. So members of the jury, when you're in deliberation, if you find the plaintiff's story about a 21-year-old boy who went to a bar drinking, was served too much to drink, and then left that bar, drove home and got in an accident, more convincing than you believe the defense's story to be, then you must find in favor of the plaintiff. Now, we're not asking you to know for sure that Montana Max overserved Al Overton. We're not asking you to know that for certainty or with any kind of positivity. We just need you to believe that more likely than not. Now, the law in this case has you deciding about how a reasonable, careful person would act under the circumstances, as established today, here by the evidence in court. Now, a person can be found negligent by failing to act. That's exactly what we've shown you here today, is Montana Max's failure to act. Failure to act in watching a visibly intoxicated person leave their bar with keys in their hand, intending to drive home. Now, this visible intoxication, this is not a subjective test. This is not one where we have to prove the mindset of the employees at Montana Max. Visible intoxication is objective. Visible intoxication is that is apparent to an ordinary person. Members of the jury, you've heard testimony after testimony today of physical characteristics that would be apparent to anyone of intoxication. But the main question here today is whether Montana Max exercised reasonable care in serving its patrons alcohol. And when discussing how Montana Max violated this standard of care, Mr. Crosby provided us with this nice acronym, TLC. Now, members of the jury, when I first heard this, I thought tender, loving care. But in this case, that's not the kind of care that Montana Max provided. Instead, Montana Max failed in providing adequate training. They failed to recognize the warning signs, and they failed to act when Al displayed signs consistent with intoxication. So let's look at these one by one. The training. Now, we've heard a lot about this TIPS training. And members of the jury, TIPS is just a way to train employees in the hospitality industry of being aware of intoxicated patrons, similar to the policies that Montana Max implements. Now, we don't have any training records for Montana Max, so we can't really say when the last time employees were trained or they weren't. We do know that there were some shop girls there on the night that weren't trained. In fact, the only understanding the shop girls had of tips, some of the shop girls had of tips, was the money that they were going to put in their pocket at the end of the night. Because the more shots they sold patrons, the more money they were shoving in their pocket. Now, this isn't reasonable in identifying an intoxicated person. Whether or were trained in tips, they were aware of the Montana Max policies. And the Montana Max policies warn against specific language and make the employees aware of certain conduct of intoxicated patrons. The language used. We've heard over and over again that Al and his friends were doing 21 shots, a shot from each shot girl, and a shot every 15 minutes. Members of the jury, when you go back into the deliberation room, you're going to have a copy of this policy. And it's not that long. I want you to read through it and look at it. Because a lot of the language we are talking about and the conduct we've discussed, it's in here. And it's discussed. And when they discuss talking about 21st birthdays, it's under the title of preventing intoxication. Members of the jury, this was the first warning sign of potential intoxication that Montana Max's employees failed to recognize. Now we also have the conduct that Al physically portrayed. We talked to two experts today in the field of service of alcohol and hospitality. And we can argue all day until we're blue in the face about what Al Overton's actual BAC level was that night. Members of the jury, it's unreasonable to think that servers or bartenders would breathalyze each and every one of their patrons. So they have to rely on the physical conduct of their patrons. And the physical conduct of their patron, Al Overton, indicated that he wasn't able to stand up on his own 2 feet, that he was loud, getting into fights with his own friends, and that he vomited. And while the expert Gene Malkin wants to tell you that the vomit was caused by food that was upset in his stomach, Gene Malkin didn't have that same information when she was determining the BAC level and the amount of food in his stomach then. When looking at these different behaviors listed under conduct that Al Overton displayed, you will see that word for word they are located here in the policies as being one of the best indicators of intoxication. And after observing these, there's a final policy about the procedure for intoxicated guests who attempt to leave. And this was indicated when Al Overton waved his keys in the air, saying he was going to another bar. Now, members of the jury, whether you believe that Al Overton was intoxicated when he walked out of that bar, he was a college student who had just turned 21, and none of the employees offered him a glass of water, food to drink, or a cab ride home. They want you to believe that they knew when Al Overton raised his keys that he was needing them to go to his apartment. But as you heard, that wasn't the key to his apartment. That was the key to his car, the car he started and drove out of that parking lot and crashed into Quinn Chase. Now, the defense has brought an affirmative defense of contributory negligence. And all this means is that they are putting blame on Quinn Chase for this accident. They want you to hold Quinn Chase responsible for being T-boned in the side. And they did this by telling you that she was distracted while driving on the phone. Members of the jury, she was using her hands-free Bluetooth. She saw the green light and she proceeded through the intersection on a well-lit street. She could have never prepared herself for what was about to hit her after she passed through that intersection. Quinn Chase was not intoxicated. In fact, her interactions with the officer confirmed that the officer never gave her a breathalyzer and never assumed that she was intoxicated that night. That's because Quinn's plan was to drive later that night, and she limited her alcohol. Al's plan was to drink that night, at deliberation, you're gonna be presented with a jury verdict form. And it's gonna ask you several questions. But I want you to keep in mind, what is reasonable? What would a reasonable person do in this situation? Would it have been reasonable to limit Al's drinks that night? Would it have been reasonable to offer him some food? Would it have been reasonable to call Al a cab to take him home? Would it have been reasonable to take Al's keys away and grab one of his friends? Ask yourself, if the answers to these questions are yes, then you must find Montana Max liable for the injuries to Quinn Chase in the accident. And you would apply a 100% to the jury verdict form. The reason members of the jury, it was Montana Max. Who's responsible in today's case. They're responsible because of the TLC that they did not implement. The training that was inadequate, the language that they failed to recognize, and the conduct that they failed to act on. But in the end, after we look at this TLC, all I see is the liable company. And that's why you should find Montana Max liable for 100% of the damages to Quinn Chase in the accident. Thank you.
Defense?
May it please the court?
Yes.
Members of the jury, responsibility, risk, rules. That's what my co-counsel told you that today's case is all about. You heard about the responsibility that each person in this case had. You heard about the risk that Al Overton and the plaintiff took the night of the accident. And then you heard about the rules that the staff at Montana Max's had in place and followed. Now, you've been here through the course of this trial. You have listened attentively. You have given us your full and undivided attention, and for that we are incredibly grateful. And I am not going to do you an injustice in closing by just repeating every single thing you've already heard today, but I must ask you to please lend me your ears one last time so that you and I must ask you, please lend me your ears one last time. Now, you've just heard the plaintiff's story, what happened that night. But now, how about you and I clarify the facts of that night? Let's talk about what you observed today. You heard from 4 witnesses that answered a variety of questions. First, the plaintiff brought before you a man named Sidney Crosby and told you that he was an expert. He told you that he formed an opinion on the night in question and that Montana Max's was clearly negligent, no question. But you also heard that there were some inaccuracies in his report. You heard that portions of his report were complete speculation. And you also heard that he is the general manager of one of Montana Max's biggest competitors, his neighboring business, as a matter of fact. Members of the jury, Sidney Crosby's no expert. You then heard from the plaintiff herself, and she gave you her version of the events of that night. She told you that she had absolutely nothing to do with her accident. But you also heard that prior to her accident, she had been drinking alcohol at her party. An amount in which that she could only sit here and give you an estimate. She then got behind the wheel of her car, started having a phone conversation, and drove downtown. She told you that everything came out of nowhere, but you saw there was only one place that Al Overton's car could have come from. The plaintiff chose not to accept the responsibility for the risk that she took that night. From our side, you heard from Dr. Gene Malcolm, a man who has a PhD in toxicology and gave his expert opinion on the events of that night. He told you that Maxis has a great set of rules in place that were followed to a T that night. Dr. Malcolm told you that there was no evidence that Mr. Overton had exhibited signs of intoxication. And that the staff at Maxis acted as reasonable people would have done and saw Al as agitated rather than intoxicated. You then heard from Max Petunia, the local businesswoman and owner of Montana Maxis. She sat here today and shared with you her policies and procedures, how she developed these policies in order to address the risk involved with her business. This was her responsibility and she owned it. She said, if you work for me, you know these policies and procedures. You know my rules. She also told you how twice a year she likes to bring in a consultant to go over this tips training and how that is something that enhances on what her staff is already familiar with. Yes, she told you that sometimes her shot servers are hired in between those tip sessions, but those shot servers go through the same shadowing process as the rest of her staff and have instruction on how many drinks each customer can have. She told you exactly how Al Overton was acting that night. She's not hiding anything. And she told you how her and her staff reacted according to the rules that were in place, and Al Overton was escorted out of her restaurant. Max Petunia stands behind her staff and their actions that night, because they were the actions of reasonable people given the circumstances of this case. So now that we've cleared up what you heard up to this point, let's talk about what you're going to do next. What I have before you is known as the jury verdict form. This is an exact copy of one that you will use when determining the outcome of this case. Everything that you have heard today is to be summarized into 5 questions, possibly only 1 question. Now, this is no easy task, but I know that you are more than capable of handling this final duty. Now, what I'd like to do now is go through each of these questions to you and reaffirm our stance and solidify our argument today. Question 1. Was Petunia Enterprises negligent? Yes or no? Members of the jury, the answer here is no. The staff of Maxis was not negligent in serving alcohol to Al Overton that night. In order to meet their burden of proof today, the plaintiff has to prove more likely than not that Maxis staff served Al Overton alcohol while he was visibly intoxicated. And that decision to serve Al Overton caused the plaintiff's injuries. And as you have seen through the arguments and evidence today, that is simply not the case. Al Overton was not visibly intoxicated when Montana Maxis staff served him, and every behavior that the plaintiff claims as signs of visible intoxication occur after Al has stopped drinking. His group entered the establishment and they were looking to celebrate. They weren't quiet and then all of a sudden became loud and boisterous. There was no change in behavior. There was no slurred speech. The only spilled drinks came when Al was leaving and knocked over a tray of drinks. This is much different than some drunk guy at a bar spilling his drink on himself. Al was an agitated customer. And when Max's staff did what the rules of Max's said to do, they escorted him out immediately. The staff was not negligent, and you must find the answer to number 1 is no. And once you do, your job here is done. No more questions, the plaintiff does not recover, and we all go home. But if you find that the answer to number 1 is yes, then your job is not done. We move on to question 2. Was the negligence of Petunia Enterprises a factual cause of any harm to Queen Chase? The answer to this question is also no. Here you must determine that it is more likely than not that the injuries to Quinn Chase would not have occurred absent the conduct of Max's staff. Now, we have just gone over the conduct of Max's staff that night. Let's talk about the accident. The accident occurred on Route 60 at the intersection outside of the parking lot. It has a 3-way traffic signal, and the cars leaving this parking lot may turn right on red. Now, Quinn claims to have not seen that, even though nothing was blocking her view of this intersection. Members of the jury, this accident was a result of one car driving down Route 60 and another car turning right on red went at the wrong time. This was simply an accident. Al having a few drinks at Max did not cause this accident any more than Quinn having a few drinks at her place caused this accident. So, ladies and gentlemen, the answer to question 2 is simply no. If you answer yes, we then move on to question 3. Was Quinn chased nowhere? Members of the jury, the answer here is yes, absolutely. Quinn Chase sat here today and tried to tell you that she had nothing to do with her accident. But what else did we hear from Quinn about that night? Quinn had just thrown a huge party. She had several drinks, and she made the decision to get behind the wheel of her car and drive downtown. This was fine to Quinn, because it's her belief that just because someone has some drinks, it doesn't mean that she can't drive. When the accident happened, Quinn was still having a conversation with someone she was on the way to pick up. Quinn never saw Alcee at the red light. And this was the only other place a car could have been at the time at that intersection. Yes, Quinn Chase was negligent in driving at night, after drinking several drinks, talking on the phone, and not paying attention to the very intersection that the accident occurred. We are not here to determine if Quinn Chase broke the law. We're here to show that Quinn Chase's actions were not that of a reasonable person, and that constitutes negligence. The answer to question 3 is yes, which brings us to question 4. Again, the answer here is very clear, yes. I'm not going to repeat what I just went over in question 3. But had Quinn not gotten behind the wheel of her car that night, we likely would not be here. Why not call herself a cab? She wants you to believe that Max should have called out a cab, but maintains that just because she had some drinks, she was good to drive. Had Quinn not been distracted by her phone conversation, she likely would have seen Al Overton's vehicle that night, since again, nothing was blocking her view, and it was the only place his car could come from. So members of the jury, we believe the answer to number 4 is yes. That Quinn Chase was a factual cause of her injuries. Now this last question, if you get this far, requires a little bit of math. You have to determine what percentage of the two parties' negligence, in this case, attributed to the accident. The total percentages must be 100%, and you are not allowed to take into account any actions of any third person. And if you find that Quinn contributed more than 50% of this accident compared to Montana Max's staff, then the plaintiff does not recover. Members of the jury, the answer to this question is that Quinn Chase is over 50% at fault in this accident. Through her actions compared to the actions of Montana Max's staff, Quinn Chase was simply the greater cause. Montana Max's staff served alcohol to a kid celebrating his birthday, and then kicked him out when he was agitated and needed to go. That kid went, likely drank somewhere else, drove off. And Quinn was there waiting because Quinn was on her way to her 2 a.m. date. This was after partying and while on the phone. Who is more at fault here? Quinn Chase is, and that is how you should find. Now, members of the jury, to close, I want you to remember 3 things about this case. First, that the plaintiff wants you to ignore the fact that Al Overton had a plan to drink that night. After getting escorted out of Max's, that plan didn't change. In fact, when he was in Max's, showing the tweet. In fact, after getting escorted to Max's, his plan didn't change. In fact, while he was in Max's at 10:30, he posted this on Twitter: "Going to finish the night off with some back dog." Second, the plaintiff wants you to find that her actions while driving were just fine. I'm talking about the drinking, the phone call, not paying attention. All because it is her belief that just because someone has some drinks, that doesn't mean they can't drive. Ironically, in their opening, plaintiff's counsel said, don't get distracted by the things that don't matter. What if Quinn hadn't been distracted that night? We might not be here. Finally, the last thing I want you to remember is that when deciding this case, you have to determine how a reasonable person act under the circumstances established by the evidence in this case. This is a hard thing to figure out. I don't run a restaurant. Your Honor doesn't own a restaurant, so you can't tell me. But Max does own a restaurant, and she was there that night. She told you why her rules are in place and what her responsibility is when serving alcohol. Max Petunia did act as a reasonable person in her position would have acted that night by following the rules that were in place. You cannot hold Max liable for actions done away from her business and not a result of her staff. So I, Jordan Cox, on behalf of my co-counsel, Ms. Lauren Hobbs, and Max Petunia, are grateful for your time today, and we are confident that you'll make the right decision and fine for Petunia LLC. Thank you.
Rebuttal?
Nothing, Your Honor, thank you.
Ooh,